Hello, everyone, and welcome to Life After the Military, a show completely focused on veterans transitioning from military to civilian life. Our show is powered by Pivotal Moments Media, an organization on a mission to strengthen mental fitness for all. Go check them out at pivotalmoments.org to learn more. My name is Lee Elias, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and co-host, Howie Cohen. And we are privileged to have Command Sergeant Major retired Michael Quinn with us today. Mike is a veteran of 24 plus years of military service as a non-commissioned officer in the United States Army. Mike is also a two-time LinkedIn top voice and has created HireMilitary, the digital networking professional program, and Tenova. HireMilitary is a veteran staffing company that provides the direct placement of veterans and military spouses and heavily leverages the DoD SkillBridge program. The digital networking professional program trains and certifies individuals to leverage LinkedIn support of personal and corporate branding, growing a network, engaging with content, and leveraging their free tools. Tenova LLC is a service-disabled veteran-owned small business that brings the unique quals of HireMilitary and the digital networking professional program, couples them with training, communications, and change management to support government and commercial clients of all sizes. Mike, it's going to be a great episode. Welcome to Life After the Military.
Thanks, Lee. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm always a little uncomfortable when I hear people read all that stuff off but it's been an incredible career so far, and I love what I do.
No, I agree with you. Look, if it makes you feel any better, sometimes it's not always easy to read these long intros, but I'll tell you what, it's worth it every time because it gives context to who you are, what you do, why people should listen to the episode. And like I said, from the intro, it's clear there's going to be a lot of value in this episode for anyone in the transition process. And it's what we do here. So we're excited about it.
Thank you.
Mike, as I mentioned in that intro, you had 24 plus years as a Command Sergeant Major in the Army. Let's start there. Share with the audience some of the things you did, how it shaped you and molded you as a person and your service overall.
So actually I retired as a Sergeant Major. I filled a Command Sergeant Major billet, but I was not selected for the command slate. And I think a lot of that was based on me having a very non-traditional career in the military. So I was military intelligence for 24 years. Specifically, I was a counterintelligence agent. So most of my early career was in small offices, on base, living off base, small teams doing investigations, civilian clothes, stuff like that. And then it transitioned as I got promoted out of those roles into a small leadership position. And then I went into a special mission unit where I was in a small team for much of the developmental portion of my leadership career. So my mid-level to senior level NCO positions were as individual contributors, working on small teams around the world. So I got to a point in my career where I was, selected for E8, so Master Sergeant, and I could have stayed in that program for another 6, 7, 8 years and continued doing a job that I enjoyed. But I realized that a lot of the people in my career field were lacking in leadership, meaning we had, as a counterintelligence agent, as a human intelligence professional, our career field changed to you could enlist in the Army to go into it until you had to be a branch transfer into it. And so a lot of our leaders were branch transfers that didn't have the foundational experience to lead the job well, aligned with our career. So I actually resigned from that program, had a connection that was a brigade CSM that said, I'll bring you on as a first sergeant anytime. And it's kind of funny. It's how the world works. I literally called the sergeant major and was like, hey, I want to resign. You said you'd have a first sergeant position for me. Is that going to happen? And he said, absolutely. And, like a month later, he's like, send your paperwork. I'm sending you to this unit. And he made the phone calls and he put me in those positions. There's no way I would have ended up there anywhere. Had I not made that phone call,
right,
I would have ended up in a force comm unit because, there's a branch, there was a branch, leader that was there going, I got to get this guy. He's going to Polk. He's going he's had too nice of a career. We got to even things out. So, I like to think looking back that I was blessed that I had somewhat of a non-traditional career because the things looking back that made me successful are the things that transferably or transferred into my transition and have allowed me to continue finding my success after the military. And I know that was a little bit of a rambling story, And I'm sure there's questions on it, but
Mike, I'm not gonna lie to you, Mike. That was actually one of the faster answers to that question. We've had people go on for about 45 minutes at times on that question before. If you go, I'm not kidding. Look. One thing you did say, and then Howie, I want to jump to you. Was I'm always amazed by how much people may underestimate asking or making a phone call. I have an employee that works for me that he came to me, asked me about what I do, and basically asked, can I have an interview?
Mm-hmm.
And I gave it to him, and he got a job, and he's been working here for 5 or 6 years. And I always tell him, if you didn't just have the gall to ask, this never would have happened. He goes, that's all I did. I just asked. I said, you don't understand how big of a deal that is.
Yeah.
Right. Taking the initiative. And I think also specifically, not just military careers, but transition and work afterwards, you got to speak up. Being humble is awesome. And again, most people I meet in the military operate that way, but you can't be afraid to ask and get what you're worth. Right. So I think that's amazing that you did that. And look what happened.
I mean, every step of my career, and I'm sorry, Howie, like literally every step of my career, I was on the phone with our branch managers asking, what's next? How do I get to this? Calling other leaders. I mean, from Private Quinn all the way up through Sergeant Major Quinn, every step. And I had peers that were like, well, the Army will figure it out. And I'm like, well, then you get what you get.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. Yeah. And here's the other thing too. The objection I run into with that kind of thinking is, well, I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. Or I've also heard that, I don't want to bother anybody. And I said, you're not. You're not doing that. All right. You're taking care of yourself. You're taking care of your family in some cases, and you're showing initiative. Right. If you're asking for a favor, that's a different conversation. Right. But if you're just taking the initiative to further your career, there's nothing wrong with that. And with that said, look, if you're completely fine with the military deciding your fate, there's nothing wrong with that either. But know what you're getting into.
And it's actually great advice because, when I was a captain, the battalion commander I worked for as a company commander told me no one will manage your career better than you do. And that's exactly the message you're sending right now, Mike. And you did it in your military career. You're doing that in your post-military career. And clearly you've had, significant levels of success in both. So listen, so what I like to do is kind of transition, Mike. You retired from the military in 2017. I know from meeting with you and doing a little bit of research that you had a bit of a challenging transition. So what I'd love to, and I know there's so much value you're gonna give to our audience in as you answer this question. So I'd like for you to share with our audience what went well, what did not go well in your transition, share key lessons learned, and you do that routinely on LinkedIn as a significant influencer there, because this is a great opportunity for our audience to continue to gain lessons learned from your experiences.
Yeah. So I think we have to go back to the decision on why I decided to retire from the Army. I mean, I was planning on doing 30 more years. Not 30 more years, 30 years plus. 30 more years would have been, I guess I would have been a warrant officer at that point, it seems like.
Yeah, that would have been a career.
So no, but seriously, I was not planning on getting out of the Army. I mean, I was in a job I loved. I was offered choice of assignment for the next one. I brought it home to my spouse at the time and said, hey, look, we get our first choice. And she said, yeah, I'm not moving. Right. So all of a sudden I had done nothing to prepare for my transition whatsoever. I wasn't on social media anywhere. I was an MI guy. Social media is bad, right?
Yeah.
And so I had to pivot. And so I said, okay, well, I can get out at 24 years and, have a career. I was in my early 40s. I could have a career. I'm in the DC area. I have a TSSCI clearance. I'm in military intelligence. I mean, if I was going to get out, like this is the place. And I'm guaranteed to get a 6-figure job. Like these companies going to be screaming for me. Or I could decide to stay in for another 6, 7, 8 years and be an older sergeant major. And maybe I'm getting out at Drum or Polk or Irwin or Korea, because I used to be a Korean linguist back in the day. There's certainly could have sent me there. And so I made the decision to get out, fully confident that companies going to be fighting over me. Like I'm the G3 Sergeant Major of INSCOM, which was one of the big players here. We had all the contracts, all this other stuff. And I'd always been a first promote during my career. So I hit the transition ready. Like I took the training. I was like hoovering up information. I spent weeks on my resume. And I went to this first job fair that was for degreed candidates, mostly officers, but degreed candidates. And I went prepared. I did research on all the employers. I had a one-pager. I had business cards. I was used to wearing civilian clothes, practiced my elevator pitch. And I went in there like nervous, but like, hey, I'm a sergeant major. Let me put my chest out. Let me walk in there and just work through all 41 employers. And I did. And I spent 6 hours talking to 41 employers, taking notes, handing my resume, giving my elevator pitch. And at the end of those 41 employers, at the end of 6 hours, I'd been told 41 times to check their careers page and apply online if I saw anything that liked me. Like, I watched everyone around me getting interviews, but when I handed them my resume, they looked at it and they're like, oh, and they circled my clearance and they put it on their pile with clearances and said, you know, check our careers page and see if you like it. So I remember what the turning point, there was 2 turning points that were really, well, actually 3. One, retired colonel was like, hey, you know, we really got to work with you on your elevator pitch. Right? Just being, I'm a leader, I want to make organizations better, I'll go anywhere, do anything for the right opportunity is not going to cut it. Like, you've got to tell people what you want. And then another one, an executive from a large bank told me, hey, this is a $200,000 a year resume. And I was like, great, let's chat. He goes, I got no idea what I do with you. You know, and so he threw that on a pile. And you know, I followed up with him a few times, no response. And then the true pivotal moment was I was nagging a recruiter, and I wish to God I remember who this guy was. I was nagging a recruiter for follow-up information. Like, he's like, hey, great, we've got jobs, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, how do I follow up? He goes, connect with me on LinkedIn. And so I made my notes. And the next day, as I was going through everything, I saw that. And so I did. Like, I got on LinkedIn for the first time. I made a profile and I sent him a connection request. And what happened was I realized that there was this incredible tool that gave me the ability to fill the gaps in my transition. So, you know, as we talk about figuring out what you want to do for your elevator pitch, well, it gave me access to veterans. It gave me access to professionals in fields all over the country that I could find something in common with and reach out and have conversations to learn more. It gave me access to people that could open doors for me, mentors. And it gave me access to the information I needed just by scanning through my feed and just like hoovering information to get myself speaking more intelligently about different career fields, you know, to be able to articulate what I did in the military in a way that resonated with hiring managers, and to really be able to figure out what I wanted to do. So I dove in, and I like, no joke, probably 4 to 8 hours a day for close to a year. Like, wow. LinkedIn, phone calls, messages, posts. I mean, like, I dove in because I saw this as this was the key. This is what I was missing. This is what I needed to transform myself. This is what I needed to get someone to see past retired sergeant major and see talent for their team. And so I still, you know, people, that's why I have no, like, people are like, my unit didn't give me time. I'm like, so I was a G3 sergeant major at a 2-star command and in a skiff, so no phones. And so like, I went outside at lunch and sent messages, you know, I was up at night. I was there early in the mornings. I was doing, you know, weekends. You know, I made the time to take care of me while still doing my military stuff.
Right.
And because I was always a guy that looked to do more, I think that really started to come across. But the key thing is, I can't say this enough, is the conversations I had with people. And when we talk about, you can't be afraid to ask. I know Lee mentioned that, and Howie, you mentioned that. I reached out to probably 1,000 people asking for phone calls, and maybe 200 said yes. And those were 200 incredible, like, life-changing phone calls. And maybe 10 of them became mentors, you know, people that I stayed in contact, people that made intros for me to other companies, people that got me into their company. for interviews. And so I have to tell people, it goes back to, you can't be afraid to ask.
You can't be afraid to ask, and you can't be afraid to network. And, it's a common theme among really high achievers. They read a lot, they converse a lot, they educate themselves a lot. And look, that's not everyone, right? And that's okay. Like I said, there's no judgment if you don't have a hefty desire to read and learn and network. But those that do tend to find ways forward. What you're reminding me of is that you said that, I reached out to 1,000 people, I had 200 phone calls, and 10 of them became mentors. That is the equation to success. And any strong entrepreneur, any strong person in business will tell you, you got to go through 1,000 no's to get a yes. Or what was that Thomas Edison quote of, I just found 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb. I think he failed 10,000 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times. And, military members, you're equipped with a skill set. You're uncomfortable with the uncomfortable. That's something you can lean on with this when you're transitioning, right? Because look, I can tell you right now, and we've equated this many times, Mike, leaving the military is not much different than leaving college, except you've had a job, you've had responsibilities, you're a little bit older, wiser, probably have a family. It's a little uneasy at first. It's very uncomfortable, and you may feel like you're owed something, right? And the truth is this: you're not really owed anything. I mean, obviously, you're owed some respect for obvious reasons if you're transitioning, but you're not owed a job, and your resume does not guarantee you anything, right? So, Mike, let's kind of continue the story here, because in 2018, it was leading us up to this. You founded Tenova, you founded HireMilitary. Tell us about that process, and obviously tell us what it is and how it works, because we're leading into this. By the way, last thing before you jump into that, you said you dove in, and I love that because it spoke to you, right? You immersed yourself in it. That is the word I like to use. It's like how you learn a language, you immerse yourself in the language. Yeah. So you immersed yourself in LinkedIn, you dove in the digital pool, and when you came up, this happened, which is amazing.
Right. And can I add, and I'll go into the 2018 part, but what you said about being comfortable being uncomfortable is true, and it's not true. Because it's what you need to be, right? And it's what we're trained to be in the military. But I think there's a battle there when we translate from military culture to private culture, in that, we're comfortably uncomfortable, but Maslow's hierarchy, the military is going to give you a meal, they're going to give you a paycheck, they're give you a place to live. So there's always that foundation of comfort. It's
very true. It's very true. You feel it as a spouse too.
Right. Yeah. So when I realized that there was a day on the calendar that I no longer had a job, right, and that I didn't have a paycheck, and the retirement for an E9 in the DC area didn't cover my mortgage. And so, that is a whole nother level of discomfort. Yeah. And what I see is different people react differently to that. Just like when you go to combat, some of the strongest performers, rounds start flying and they freeze. And then you've got the Audie Murphys of the world, the little tiny guys that go through and become, the ultimate warrior in a lot of ways. And it's the same way with the transition. Once it all starts to become real, I see some people, dive in. Okay, I know it's going to be difficult, but I'm going to do everything I can to kind of fill those gaps, prepare for my transition, be comfortable, get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Right.
But then I see a lot of people, particularly those that are in the more senior leader roles, not like it and not want to face it and turn away from the transition. The jobs are going to be there.
Right.
I've got a mission, right? They focus on their job and they just leave it to the side. And those are the ones that are at risk when they get out. Everyone's at risk when we get out and lose our community, but I see a lot of hardship for those senior military leaders that can't understand why corporate America is not screaming to hire them at this level or whatever, give them 6-figure jobs when they did nothing to change themselves because they couldn't.
Mike, let me rescind that question real quick, because you created another question. Actually, I think it's really important to ask. So I think there's no doubt that you would agree that there is experience there. Follow me here, right? There's experience with being comfortable with the uncomfortable that you earn in the military, right? Everybody gets that.
Yep.
So my question is now, based on what you just said, how do you unlock that in the civilian world in the situation you just said? So if you are a higher ranking officer, right, you have the experience, but you said you might not lean on it. So how do you unlock that experience and apply it?
I mean, ultimately, we've got to get away from this message that the private sector is screaming to hire veterans.
Yeah.
Right. There's this permeating message throughout the military from people that have never worked in the private sector that corporate America wants us, that they're screaming for us, that they're fighting for us. And we got to take that and just throw it out. And we've got to realize that we are competing with people that on paper look exactly like a fit for the role, with companies that understand, and nothing that we put on a resume is going to look like a perfect fit for that role, unless it's back in the defense sector doing exactly what we did in the military, right? And so to really unlock that, honest to God, you've got to have those conversations.
Right.
You got, like, you want to be a project manager, reach out and talk to project managers and ask them what they do, what their day's like, what they don't like, what their biggest challenges are, right? You know, what their biggest successes are. And you know, you have a couple of those conversations and then ask them, hey, based on my experience in the military, you know, am I a good fit right out of the gate?
Right.
And, you know, don't get angry if you don't like the answer.
Right. That's a great point you're making. You know, you got to do the research. You got to have those conversations. I love that you're saying that, you know, and it goes back to what you said before too. You were talking about, you know, when you were going through this, you did 41 employers, right? And you had your stuff set. You said too that, you know, sometimes you give broad answers like, I'll do anything and I'm ready to start.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, nobody wants to hear that. They don't want the I'll do anything. They want the I will do this and I will do this very well. You know, I know this just from being in the public speaking world. You know, when someone asks you, what do you talk about? You never say whatever you need.
Yeah.
That's not what they're asking. They want you to tell them what you're going to talk about so they can be like, that is what I need.
Yeah.
And it's a common mistake that's made. You know, same thing like with the question of like, well, what's your greatest weakness? All right. Well, I just have so much to do. That's not what you want to say. You know, I got so many things going on. You know, I always tell people greatest weakness is that I need more experience to get the goals that I want to strive. Let me tell you about my goals.
Yeah.
Be specific, you know? So one more time before we jump to the higher military,
no.
making other questions pop in my head. This might be a multi-tier answer, but
yeah,
when you're having those interviews, right? This is a good question for our listening audience. You know, we know from interviewing lots of people that sometimes military experience doesn't translate perfectly to an interview, right? Especially from a leadership standpoint. What are one or two stand out, and these can be generic, you know, things that a veteran can say in an interview to express how important their leadership is? And I'm asking this because, and we've said this on many episodes, Mike, that the experience you have as someone in the military with leadership and teamwork is insanely invaluable and insanely needed. And I'm not sure that we cross the line a lot with employers and understanding that this person is a leader, is a good teammate, and will fit in. Do you have any, again, advice or ways of saying that you think might stand out in an interview?
Oof, this is a multi-tiered answer.
We only ask tough questions here.
Yeah, I love it. So let me ask you a question. Are you talking about like a job interview or an informational interview?
I think I'm talking job, but if you think informational interview is more important, we can go that direction.
Yeah, I think we could do both. So
yeah,
let me go to the job one first, right?
Yeah. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No. I like this. This is great.
Yeah.
I don't care that you're a military leader. I don't care how many people you led in the military. I don't care that you led in combat, right? I hate to say this, and this is going to be hard for people to understand. And, you know, I care, can you do the job? Right? So if you're an account manager, do you know how to care and provide care and feeding of clients? Do you know enough about the product or the community or the industry? Do you know how to upsell? You know, do you know how to drive revenue? You know, are you a good team player? You know, if you're a recruiting manager, how much recruiting experience do you have? You know, and that if you're an HR manager, I want to know that you're your HR profession, that you're going to be able to not just, you know, lead the team that you're going to be able to, build a vision that aligns with what our company needs.
Right.
So I'm going to take that. This is my biggest challenge is everyone's like, I'm a leader, and like, throw that one out. I don't care. What job are you going to do? And I'll tell you, I've had some challenges with senior military leaders that don't realize when they get out of the military that they have to make people decisions based on the bottom line.
Right. Right.
You can't spend 90% of your time on 10% of the people out here. If you do that, you will be out of a job along with that 10%, right? That we have to make business decisions. It's hard because, I don't want to do it for money, whatever, but the money's got to come from somewhere.
Right.
My buddy, Tim Cochran, had a great analogy. He said, go outside and look at the meter for your electric outside your house. Does that ever stop running? Where's that money come from? Like, you got to work, you got to make money somewhere to pay for it. So, I want to take that leadership side and put it out. Now, I also want to say that the best leaders I've seen, like I've seen some incredible leaders in the military, but I've also seen some incredible leaders in the private sector. And I've got some buddies that I worked with at EY that ran circles around me. From a leadership perspective. And I'm a retired sergeant major, and I wasn't a fantastic leader. I was a good leader, not fantastic. So I want to take that leadership part and kind of say, like, it cannot be your focus. Like, it's a plus, right?
Right.
It's you get to the interview, you get to the short list, where there are these 3 to 5 people that all have the technical ability and the experience and the background to do the job. And that's where the leadership and the soft skills set you aside.
Right.
They set you apart. They help you get selected. But you can't go in there thinking leadership is going to get you a role. Period. It doesn't happen that way. You got to be able to do a job or a function. I actually did a post this morning. That lines up direct, like, because I had these conversations, it wasn't resonating. I said, could you take an experienced construction project manager and flip them the next day to be an IT modernization project manager? Right? What's the answer? No, right? they don't understand IT, most likely. They don't even know what skill sets are required for the role. They can't even talk the deliverables and the programming languages and all this other stuff. What if they were a veteran construction manager? Does that really make a difference?
Right.
Probably not, right?
Yeah.
Unless they were IT in the military. So I really want people to, and I'm sorry, this is like, you got me on a roll here.
No, that's the point of the show.
I really want people to focus on figuring out what they want to do, not a rank, not be in charge. What really drives them? What do they love? And I think if you go back and look at the things you focused on throughout your career, you'll find that thread with the help of mentors. So I was an MI sergeant major, but at each one of my units, I found myself, I did the MI side because that was my wheelhouse, but a lot of my focus was on making sure that everybody had their evals on time, that they all got awards before they left. All the HR processes were lined up. Manning and budget and all the other stuff. And what I found is that blended well and led me to, after 200 plus interviews and 8 months of hard work, HR consulting. Not running HR for a company, because I didn't want to do employment law. But like coming in and fixing HR problems with a team. And so that's where that, like, you got to get in there. And I went way off track. But you got to get in there and really like figure out like, what do you want to do? Because if you find something you love, everything else will take care of itself.
But Mike, I'll tell you this. I love hosting shows like this, and you didn't get off track because you just gave me the perfect segue because you love doing HR consulting. That led you in 2018 to creating something. Why don't you tell everybody about HireMilitary? Coming back to the question. Now, first off, thank you. Thank you for those answers. I think those were important questions and phenomenal answers. But tell us a little bit about what this led to, because it is incredible what you've built.
So I got on LinkedIn and, really dove in. I think at the end of my first year, towards the end of my first year on LinkedIn, I had about 3,000 connections, and I was teaching I saw nobody else besides Justin Pearson. He's the only other like transitioning service member I saw on LinkedIn. And he started a few months before me, was like really growing this network. And I started teaching in my unit how to use LinkedIn, not how to transition, just how to use LinkedIn. And then I started getting asked to teach other units. And so all of that happened. And at the same time, I was still trying to figure out what was next for me. And so what happened was I had a conversation with one small company CEO, and about like things I could do, DoD skill bridge, veteran space. I wanted to be originally thought I wanted to be into like the veteran transition space. And then she's like, hey, I can't use you. My company's too small. We don't have the overhead. Let me introduce you to another CEO that's looking for somebody like that. And so I went and had coffee with introductions through LinkedIn with the CEO of ProSphere, the company where I started working. And 15 minutes into the conversation, the CEO made me a job offer. Wow. Like I thought I was going into just a talk, and he's like, we've grown from 200 to close to 500 in a few months, and we grew too fast. I need someone to, hold standards, create standards, hold people accountable, build a training program, bring up morale, make sure we're getting involved if people are getting placed where they need to go. I'm like, my God, you need a sergeant major. And he's like, yes. He's like, and so he created this director level role for me, which was such an incredible opportunity. It was a director of workforce management role. It kind of aligned with the HR arena where I wanted to be. And it was an individual contributor role. So like I was a director, but I didn't have anybody that worked for me. I went in to fix, challenges, to create programs, to build things to help with his vision. And, aside from the sucking from the fire hose part of learning how to do the transition there with like all this gray space, because no one was there to tell me how to do stuff. I had to go talk to people and learn what the challenges were. It was a great first job. So I got in there, I started doing that. He was great. He wanted me to do more training around the country. So if I went on a trip to visit some clients or to visit some of our team and there was a base nearby, he's like, go ahead, go do a workshop there or whatever. So that started the training piece. And, I think it was January of 2018. There was a Hiring Our Heroes corporate fellowship program that started up here in the DC area. And this is nothing against them. They're an amazing program. They do a tremendous amount of good for our community. But they started in the DC area. They had 30 slots and they had 90 candidates. So 60 people that had their heart set on a DoD Skillbridge internship for 3 months, 12 weeks, full time with an employer, suddenly got a message that they weren't selected. And so a lot of them reached out to me and said, hey, what do I do? And I'm like, well, go find your own. You don't need somebody else to sponsor you or to set it up. Just find a company that wants to do it and create your own individual internship. And they said, well, how do I do that? And I realized, holy crap, like they don't know how to explain the Fair Labor Standard Act and how this isn't an unpaid internship. They don't know where to start with companies. They don't know how to explain to companies how to set up these programs from an HR consulting perspective, and they don't even know what companies to ask. And so that was, literally that, like, they're like, I realized, this incredible model that H2H built doesn't reach the entire military population. And I kind of wanted to try to fill that gap. And so that's it. I'm like, I need to create something to reach the people that can't fit the cohort timelines, that don't have a degree, can't get accepted, maybe are non-traditional fields. And so I had this idea of creating this platform that allowed companies to post opportunities for internships, service members to, say I'm available and create a profile, and either could click and then, my company would, process all the paperwork with the installations, with the services, with DoD, whatever. And I sketched it all out. I talked to a couple of people. They were like, great. And then get ready for this. I spent all of my savings to make it happen.
Wow.
All of my savings. People forget that part of being an entrepreneur. Every cent I had in savings went into this idea. And I did not make a cent until my third year.
Sounds right.
Wow.
So all the speaking engagements that I was getting paid nice fees for went back to growing the company, or went back to the people that were 1099s at the company and everything else like that. So, like I worked a second full-time job for 3 years for something that did not make me any money. I just had to have that belief.
Right.
So while I was doing that and surrounding myself with the right people and staying with the vision and growing the vision, seeing what works, what doesn't work, what clients want, what they don't want. So HireMilitary's evolved. I was working at ProSphere for a year. I outgrew that job, about 8 months in. And, I feel kind of like the company wasn't able to move as fast as I wanted to or as I needed to. And, honestly, the CEO was a great guy, but the people that were leaders in his company were there when he had 30 people. And there's a difference in leading 30 people than leading 500 people. And a lot of his now vice presidents hadn't ever been challenged to grow and weren't thinking at a more strategic level and weren't used to, growing and trusting their direct reports, which were the leaders responsible for the care and feeding of all their people. So, I kind of hit this wall where I needed to be in charge of more stuff. And he's like, yes, but I don't want to get rid of this person, or I don't want to move this person. And, and I finally was like, look, I'm going to get all these things done. I promised you I do. And at a year and 5 days, I left. I started my network and I went over and became a senior manager at EY. And for a lot of the people that aren't, it's not a huge defense name, but Ernst & Young is one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the world, And I was an executive there. And again, I didn't look on paper on my resume like any other executives, any other senior managers, my peers. In fact, recruiting told me afterwards, we would never hired you. Over a beer, look, you would have never made it through us. The only reason you got hired at EY was because partners told us to hire you. I had conversations with partners. They saw talent and said they wanted me on their team. And so now let me tie this all back around real quick. I never would have met that CEO, either CEO. I never would have met those partners, in real life. I didn't run in the same circles. I didn't go to the same events. They're not in kickball leagues, in my local community. I'm not striking up a conversation with the gym, and I'm certainly not bumping into them at the bar or anything like that. Right. So there's no way, shape, or form I would have met these people without LinkedIn, without, really getting out there, building a network and having conversation after conversation after conversation. And I still do it today. So, I did EY for 2.25 years. I loved it. Didn't want to be a partner at the firm. I wanted to kind of, I'd been in the Army. So I did the Army way, this huge organization that decided we were going to go. And I went to another huge organization with over 300,000 people. And, I loved it, but I found I would be a better partner outside of the firm than I was in it. And so I finally in 2000, so HireMilitary, there's only one company. It's Tenova, right? Tenova LLC is my only company. I've got business units underneath it. So I've got the HireMilitary business unit. I've got the government contracting business unit. And then I've got the training, LinkedIn training, DMPP. We do a lot of corporate training and everything else like that. So there's only one company, Tenova. So at the end of last year, EY shifted to a unlimited vacation policy, which sounds great.
Yeah, I've had those too.
But then they say, hey, on January 1st, you lose all your banked vacation. And I'm a veteran. So how much vacation do you think I had? Everything they let me carry over. So I had 6+ weeks of vacation. And at the salary they were paying me, I'm like, I'm not prepared to give you that. And so I finally hit a point last year where we had enough revenue programmed for this year to give me a 1-year launch pad to make, my salary is covered for a year. Like I knew I was going to be fine. I had enough booked work, everything else. And so I left EY December 23rd of last year, focused full-time on my company in January. And it's been exponential growth, ever since then. I mean, I brought on a business partner because I didn't have the business acumen. Even though I'd been out for 3 years, there's just things I'm not good at. I had to learn how to get better at asking for money, which is a big thing. Companies will take free all day, but they don't expect it.
Right.
I've thrown out some insane numbers for speaking engagements and they're like, okay, great. And if I just said, you sure, I'll do it, they would have been, okay, great. So, and then, building the processes to be able to run an effective company. So we've added 20 full-time employees this year. We're in the, 7 figures in revenue this year, first full year, and have so much growth. It's been fantastic. So, but it's also been this.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So sorry, I'm like, so
no.
Yeah,
no, you're fine, Mike. I think Howie. I would, Howie. I have a feeling Mike and I are very similar people, just from the way we're doing this. And Mike, again, before Howie move on to your question, this is what I'm going to say to the listeners too, Mike, because you're bringing up some amazing points. You're giving a quick master's class in entrepreneurship. Any successful entrepreneur has to take a massive risk. There is a jumping off the cliff moment for any successful entrepreneurship journey. You said that you didn't get paid. I can relate to that with my company. I remember I started my company as a military spouse living in another country, and my business partner and I, same thing, right? He fills in the gaps that I have. We put a date on the calendar, 3 years, like you said, literally 3 years from that date. We told our wives, if we're not taking paychecks by this date, we won't do it anymore. We literally got our first paycheck on that date, and it was somewhat a coincidence, but literally was the first date available where we could do it. So that it takes time to do it. Number two. So the risk is there, the time is there, and then you have to be able to pour your heart and really believe in what you're doing. That is the other part you said. You cannot half-ass an entrepreneurship journey and hope. In sport, when I work with athletes, I always say hope is death to an athlete. Hope is a nice thing, but you can't have just hope and survive in that arena. All right, you have to have belief. You have to have faith. You have to know and believe in what you're doing. And get this, it still might not work out, and even with that, because timing is very important. And who knew a pandemic was going to happen? It's amazing that you did what you did during that. And then the last thing I was going to touch on was, you talked about networking and that job. I worked at the NHL for several years, and everybody asked me how I got that job. This is how I got that job. I was at an ice rink, and I saw a business card on one of my coworkers' desks. As I just volunteered at the ice rink. Didn't have any title, just had a name at NHL.com. That's all it had on it. I wrote it down. I emailed the person, no idea who this person is. Email basically just said, my name is Lee. I want to work in hockey. I saw your email. It's got an NHL.com. Can I meet you for lunch? Yep. Right? Guy met me for lunch. I had a job within 6 months. Right?
Yeah.
Talk about a go-getter, right? I could have looked at it and just moved on.
Yeah.
Right? You never know is the point. What networking, what communication, what conversation. Howie and I met that way. He just happened to see one of my books lying around. I mean, you never know.
Yeah.
All right. And the people that take the initiative tend to find the way. But I had to, as an entrepreneur myself, I just had to reiterate that if you're thinking about entrepreneurship, it's a very rewarding and awesome journey, but it's a lot like a sports game. There's ups and downs. You're going to lose some, you're going to win some. Championships are very elusive, but possible, and you better be ready for that. And if you have that mindset, you can do it.
Yeah. Can I add a couple things real quick there? One,
please.
To be successful, a lot of people don't realize this, like to be successful as an entrepreneur, there's other people that have that product or service, right? Why do they choose you? That's relationships and trust, right? At scale. So we've hit this point this year without a single outbound salesperson. All of our business came to us.
That's awesome.
So we've had the flexibility, right? That gives you some financial flexibility when work comes to you, right? When you have that trusted brand. So that's one piece. The other part is that, I believe that the company has to be more than you. It has to become more than you. And one of the hardest decisions I had to make was I had to fire my best friend at 35 years. Like business decisions. He was my best friend of 35 years and he wasn't able to keep up. And I had to fire him. I had to call him, he's in Philly.
It's the reality.
I had to call him and look him in the eyes and say, hey man, like, I got to let you go. Like, this is like, I have to make a business decision. There's 20 families that, rely on this company for their livelihood. And I can't make a decision because you're my buddy, and so, some of those hard decisions, are like, that was a really hard call. And so, and I've had to let other people go.
Yeah.
And
it's the worst part of the job.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I just think the entrepreneurial lifestyle, there's a lot of ups and downs, but if you love what you do, like if you're, I'll say that the work-life balance thing that I see all these people saying, like complaining against the grind, don't glamorize the grind. Look, it's not a grind if you love it.
Right. Right.
It's a passion is one thing. And, if you truly believe in what you want to do and you're willing to put forth the work and get it, going in the right direction, you surround yourself with the right people and you're in a constant growth mindset, the sky's the limit.
Yeah. And that's one of the best parts about living in this country too. And I have to say this, man, I've seen other countries' business setups, and I'm not saying that they're horrendous or anything like that, but it is far easier here to chase your dream, surprise, than almost anywhere else that I've been. Because I've had to assist people setting up businesses in multiple countries, and the red tape is insane. Here, you can have a business up and running in 24 hours here. You really can. It's incredible. It's incredible. So anyway, look, I think that's amazing advice, an amazing roadmap you just presented to the listeners. And again, look, if that doesn't fit your personality, that's absolutely okay. All right. It's not for everybody. But if it does, Mike, I, and Howie are all saying, take a look. All right, go for it. Because we need people like that. Right. So, Howie, go ahead. I feel like I'm taking up all the air.
No, this is actually a great conversation, and I see how engaged you are, Lee, and it's actually exciting to me. So
I had my coffee, and it's in the morning when we're recording this. And,
no, this is
sometimes our 2:00 recordings. I get that really focused face because I have to be here. But no, it's great. I appreciate that, Howie. This has been a great episode so far.
So Mike, and actually some of the things you talk about, I think is a great segue to what I want to ask in my next focused question is, I've personally followed you for the better part of 8 months on LinkedIn, and Lee mentioned in the introduction that you've been recognized 2 times as a LinkedIn top voice and influencer. I know from personal experience, and this is me talking, but I'm sure I speak for a fairly large and broad and deep network, that you bring tremendous value to your audience in what you share, the content you share on LinkedIn. So what I'd like for you to talk about is, and actually this might even go into the digital networking professional program that you teach, and it's part of your business. Talk to folks about how they can effectively use social media platforms, specifically LinkedIn, to reach out and make a change in their lives and accomplish the things that they want to accomplish. Because I think you give tremendous focus and value in that area.
Yeah, no, happy to. So the first thing I want to do is I want to reframe part of that. So what I've started telling people is not to consider LinkedIn social media. It's the most trusted social media platform, blah, blah, blah. But when most people think of social media, they think of like the dumpster fires right now that are like, Twitter and Facebook and all that other stuff, the craziness, like I don't want to share or I want to overshare, all this other stuff. What I call LinkedIn is a networking tool, right? There's no other platform that allows you to go out there and find people that you have something in common with and just connect and see where it goes, right? So when we talk about using LinkedIn, and this is the foundation of what the DMPP program is teaching people how to create a profile, right? Which sounds kind of similar, kind of easy, but there's some things you could do to make it better. But the idea is you create a profile that gives people enough information at a glance to see whether they want to connect with you, right? Whether they want to accept your connection request, whether they want to connect, or to see where you get the experience to be considered a valued contributor, right? That you know, if you're going to post about XYZ, you know, I should be able to look at your profile and say, you know, that's where they got that experience. So, you know, we talk about creating that profile, which is the foundation for enabling you to expand that network. And then I really get into teaching people how to intentionally grow that network, right? So in the military, you know, we live in a bubble, right? And so, you know, all of our networks, all of our connections are in the military community. And if you think back, you know, very rarely are you talking to people outside of the military. And then I'll take it a step further. The moment you leave that bubble, no one of your unit's calling to check up on you, unless they need something that you didn't hand over in your transition. So suddenly you're outside of that. And so, you know, you don't have the network you need to find opportunities, right? But here's the crazy thing. We've got it easier. I mean, yeah, there's the translation part. We've got it easier than any other community in this entire country because we automatically have something foundationally in common with every veteran out there. Like we served, right? And then I'm going to throw in their military spouses because they serve. And so I don't know very many military spouses that wouldn't see value in having a conversation with a veteran and vice versa as well. And so I tell people one of the big differentiators between us and our private sector competitors for opportunities is many of our competitors, and I say that in the right way, in a nice way, are calling their buddies at other companies, right? They're making, you know, or you know, they have companies that are known on a resume. And where we get the advantage is that we can reach out to veterans, and because we've served, many of them will take the call in some amazing places. And so my buddy Tim Cochran just set up one retiring service member with the CEO of HSBC, like this huge bank. And the CEO has agreed to spend a few hours a month with a transitioning service member. Like, this is real. This happens. You know, I've had, you know, I had lunch with the CEO of Nestle. You know, I'm having conversations with these C-suite leaders from, you know, multi-billion-dollar companies because they're veterans, right? The CEO of Johnson & Johnson got out as a captain, Alex Gorski. He's a veteran. And that's why they have such a robust veteran, you know, employment program. So going back, and we've got to intentionally grow our network where we need it to be. So I teach a lot of service members how to go in and do searches for veterans in either companies that interest them or jobs that interest them or industries or locations, and just connect. Maybe ask for a phone call, a short phone call, small asks, or ask a question or ask for some advice. And to do it before they need a job. Because we don't want the engagement to be transactional. If I reach out, you know, to you, Howie, I'm like, hey, Howie, it's Mike, you know, hey, I need a job. What do you have for me? Like, instinctively, this goes back to my Intel background. Like, you know, I'm only calling you because I want something or I need something. And it makes it hard to get that relationship. And so I tell people, start early and just ask for advice. And if we get back to Lee's earlier question about the interview, I'm going to take it around full circle about focusing on leadership. When it comes to informational interviews, I want the service member or recent veteran to spend most of their time asking questions and listening, not talking. Because if we have a conversation, like if I have a conversation with a transitioning service member and most of the conversation is them asking interested connection questions about me, and for me to share their advice or taking it, I start to feel a connection, right? Because they're interested in what I have to say. And, everybody likes to talk about themselves to a point, right? Especially if they're giving advice. And so, so when it comes to intentionally growing your network, a lot of times it's just asking the right questions, showing genuine interest. And then here's the big part, always sending a thank you note.
Right.
We lose that in the military. We expect leadership. We expect intrusive leadership. We expect people but in the private sector, that's not the case. And so I tell people, if anyone spends time with you, it takes you a minute to send a note. Hey, Bob, thanks for the phone call today. I really appreciate it. And again, we're talking about strengthening that connection. And then the last part that I really focus on is how to build those relationships. And that's through engaging with content. And so bear with me here. So you created this profile that says who you are as a professional, and it could just be Sergeant Major at US Army. This is my background. Then you start intentionally growing your network by connecting with these people. But how do you build a relationship at scale with all these people? And that's where the content comes. So every time you comment, every time you share something, you're sending out this spider web of threads to your network. And every time someone in your network sees your picture, your headline, your location with a comment that resonates with them, with a post that resonates with them, the picture that resonates with them, it creates a thread, right? And the more threads you create with someone, you're really, I'll take it in a military term, you're creating connective tissue. The relationship starts to form. And if you see someone's picture, their profile picture, their headline, and their comments enough, instinctively, you start to feel like you know them, whether you've ever met them or not. And there are hundreds of people on LinkedIn that comment on my stuff that don't ask for anything. But by the time they do, yes, I feel like I know you because we've seen each other on LinkedIn so much. And it's just, it's no different than what we do in personal life. It's no different than face-to-face. If I ran in, I'm like, Howie, I know you because that thread, I felt a connection at that networking event. I genuinely saw your passion. You mentioned you came out there to talk to me. That resonates with me. You mentioned the podcast. All these threads came together. So I felt I knew you. And I feel like, Lee, if I bumped into you at an event 3 times, I'd be like, hey, dude, here's my number. Let's hang out. There's you feel these connections. And the key is just putting yourself out there. And the last part I'll say, and then I'm sorry, I'm really on a roll with this one as well, is a lot of people focus their content on the transition, right? I'm looking for a job. I did this interview. I went to this job fair. I went to this networking event. And the problem with that is you start to be someone that's been looking for a job for a year.
Right.
It's not a good thing, right? And you're not really giving us anything to really feel a connection, right? You're not giving us something that resonates with us. We get numb to it in a lot of ways. The only people that resonates with are other job seekers, right? So you're not expanding your network outside of that bubble where you need it to be.
Commiserating.
Right. So it's like the people that post recruiters suck posts, and they'll get 10,000, people that click like and comment. None of them are recruiters, and none of those recruiters that see that are ever going to hire you. So I tell people that you just have to share things that are a snapshot of your life. And look, if you want to be a project manager, share times you've led projects.
Right.
Or hurdles you've overcome. If you like CrossFitting, it's okay to share CrossFit, because every CrossFitter out there in that cult is gonna be like, oh man, he's a CrossFitter, and they're gonna feel that connection. I say cult in the nicest way, of saying it. If you cycle, if you mountain climb, if you garden, you got to mix this personal side in it. And I try to say personal, professional. These are things that you would discuss in the office, with your colleagues. But as you start to do that, just grab these snapshots. Don't focus on creating content. Share the conversations, the thoughts, the questions, the events that happen in your life. And instinctively, this platform brings you all together. And that's where opportunity comes. I think there was like a 7-minute answer. So I'm really sorry.
All of your answers have been fantastic. Number one, don't worry about that. Mike, again, just feeding off that, one of the things I do, again, keeping in mind, I am an entrepreneur, but on my LinkedIn profile, very, very, almost immediately when you read what I do, it says I'm a father, I'm a husband. I put that pretty early on. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because somebody asked me one time that legit asked, like, well, what if someone sees that and they don't, they don't hire you because that's what they put there. I said, I don't want to work with them if they don't like that. I'm not just selling myself professionally. I'm telling people who I am, mm-hmm. right, and what I do. And like you said, make that connection with somebody else of social media is not just, a classified section, right? It is your ability to share parts or aspects of who you are and what you stand for. And I think that's really important. I read this great article yesterday. This is actually a perfect time to share it, about an interview someone had with Jeff Bezos from Amazon. Mm-hmm. And it was fun, just to make it really short, right? The person waited a long time. They didn't even know they were interviewing with Jeff Bezos. So they walk in the room and Jeff Bezos walks in, CEO of Amazon, for anybody who doesn't know. And he says, I'm only going to ask you 2 questions, right? And the first question, and this is how he said it. He says, this first one's just a fun one. How many panes of glass do you think there are in Seattle? Right. And it was funny because the person being interviewed, after they got over the initial fear of the question, which took about 2 seconds, he said, have fun with it. So they had fun with it. Right. They put the equation. Okay, there's 1 million people in Seattle. And, you look at, schools versus this versus that. And, the person worked with Jeff Bezos to find an answer. Took about 20 minutes, and Bezos said, yeah, that looks about right. But they had a good time together. Mm-hmm. Right. So the first question was just to say, okay, can I even talk with this person, work with this person? And the second question was, what are your goals and aspirations? Mm-hmm. And the person didn't say it's to work at Amazon. It's, right. I want to work here because it will help me accomplish this. This is my big vision. Person was hired on the spot. Not only were they hired on the spot, their desk was about 10 feet away from Jeff Bezos's desk. And this is not super early on in the company. This is, when it was rapidly grown. Mm-hmm. Right, probably 10, 15 years ago. Yeah. And that I love that article because it just goes to show you, that the typical everyday questions, people are looking for someone they relate with, mm-hmm. someone that can be critical at thinking, and someone that has a goal in mind. Yeah. Right. That's not what you're taught in movies.
What makes you qualified to be here? How many years of experience do you have? Like,
and don't get me wrong, those interviews still happen, unfortunately. 2 questions to work at Amazon next to one of the top 3 richest people in the world, no matter what you think of them. Conversations reminding me of that.
I mean, if you think about the interview, and I want to get back to your profile for a second, and I'll give you my take on some of that stuff. When you get to the final interview, the 3 to 5 that are shortlisted, interviewing with hiring managers panels, they're all qualified.
Right.
They're all going to have qualified answers, right? What really sets you apart is ultimately that hiring manager and the other people that are interviewing saying, I want to work with this person.
Right.
Like that connection,
right,
is the huge part. So that's one. And then if I can get back to like what I would advise, so I will take a slight same intent, but from a LinkedIn standpoint, and I live on this thing. So this is why I look a little bit.
I believe you.
So I agree with you on, the father-husband piece, but I wonder how many people don't take that second look at your profile because they don't see what you do from a professional identity.
Right.
So what I tell people is from the headline standpoint, it should be focused on your professional identity. And then what I tell them is to share content related to family,
right?
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that, unfortunately, that'll mean a lot more of these companies will reach out and pitch you once they know you're an entrepreneur. You'll have to wade through all of that, but there are other people that will see the headline about more aligned with what you do and start thinking of you for those opportunities.
I totally agree with you. Yeah. And like I said, it's early on in the profile because I agree with you. Actually, I get the same advice of it's important. So it's got to be there, but don't lead with it. But yeah, no, and again, I'm in an entrepreneur mindset. Totally agree with you though, right? You got to let people know who you are. And then the content, as you just said, when you share, are you sharing pictures of your kids and your family? Because that's important.
Yeah.
So Mike, we're going to keep moving here because we got about 6-7 minutes left. Before we get to the final question, it has now become commonplace here. I give every guest a book title that if you were to write a book, I come up during the episode with a title for what your book would be. right? We've had some funny ones. We had some serious ones. Yours again came early in the episode. Your book title is 41 Employers to Entrepreneurship. And I wrestled with that one. Do I want to do 1,000 phone calls to entrepreneurs? No, it's 41 employers to entrepreneurship, because I love that story. I think it's actually a really great story that you said. I went to every single one, and they all told me the same thing, man. And you know, how and when you're talking about mental fitness right now, how thankful actually you must be for that experience, even though it's probably painful at the time.
Mhm.
You know, those are the typical types of adversity that we face as people that really point us in the right direction. If that had not happened, we would not be having this conversation.
Yeah.
Right. So the last question for the show, bud, is Pivotal Moments is all about mental fitness and spreading it worldwide, you know, and we all struggle with it in some way, right? I use fitness as an example. Physical fitness and mental fitness are equally as important. So how do you define mental fitness? How do you practice your mental fitness? Again, you're a very go-getter, right? And people, I think, sometimes look at type A personalities. Oh, they don't have any problems. That's not true. That's not true at all. Like, you know, we all have ups and downs. So how do you define mental fitness, and how do you practice it on a daily basis?
Oof. Wow. I don't really have an answer for that. That's a tough one. You know, I mean, ultimately, you know, first of all, I think the mental and the physical fitness pieces are connected. I do work out. I do ride a bike, and I find that riding my bike, and I put 80s music on there and jam to it as I'm going out.
We
on a
really
ride.
are the same person, dude. It's
so I go ride my bike, and you know, it allows me to disconnect. You know, like 5-10 minutes into the bike ride, I stop thinking about work. I'm definitely not on LinkedIn. I'm not replying to emails or anything else like that. And I just go out for about, you know, an hour or so, and just, you know, jam to my music, sing, and sometimes ideas come in, but you know, that part of disconnecting is hugely important to me. I do all of my LinkedIn. So I've got 307,000 followers on LinkedIn. I respond to all my messages. I respond to my content. Like, I don't have anybody doing my LinkedIn for me. And I don't think a lot of people understand how much effort that takes, and how much it takes out of you to be on for every conversation,
right?
You know, and to have to decide which people you're going to invest your time in, knowing that every one of them sees you as a lifeline, right? Every one of them is going through their transition. And, you know, if we're going to go back to this, you know, mental fitness, I will share that the year of my transition was the hardest year of my life. Harder than any deployment, harder than anything else in my career. I have to say that it was a factor in my divorce, right? Without a doubt. We're very amicable, you know, and everything else like that. And there was other things, but, you know, it definitely played a role. And so when a lot of people see success, you know, there was a lot of hardship to get there. There were a lot of uncertainties, there were a lot of challenges, a lot of hard decisions, you know, and even today, like when I don't have my kids, it's me in my house all day, right? And so when we talk about mental health and fitness, when we line it up to the bubble of the military and nobody in your unit's calling to check on you 2 days after you're out, you know, we lose our community when we transition. Like, we lose the brotherhood or the sisterhood or whatever you want to call it. But, you know, you don't show up for PT in the morning. You know, you're not there complaining about leadership at lunch, or, you know, going out on your field problems or whatever. And I think that is what hits us hardest in our transition, is we've been surrounded, you know, intrusive leadership, people checking on us, having to be somewhere. And when we get out, suddenly there's this huge gap that needs to be filled. And I think that for me, one of the biggest differentiators was, you know, because I'm networking, you know, all the time, that community was still always kind of there, if that makes sense. You know, And so, the biggest thing that I would say to veterans or transitioning service members is to make sure you're building that community so that it's there when you're out. And what is unique about our community is that because we move so often, like there could be somebody that I served with, and this happens, that I served with 10 years ago. And we haven't talked since I left that unit or they left the unit or whatever. And we end up in the same place and it's like we're still best friends. Do you know what I mean? Like there's an instant connection. So veterans have this ability because we've been programmed that way to just instantly reconnect. And I want people to realize that that's there and that you can reach out to people or you worked with and have those conversations. And to never think that we're alone. That you could, if you need help, if you're in a bad place, if you feel alone, like there's veteran groups all over the country that you can go have a beer with, or you can go fishing with, or go biking with, or you could just reach out to veterans on LinkedIn and say, look, I'm in a bad place. Do you got some advice?
Right.
And so when we talk about, I truly believe that the 22 a day, the 22 veterans a day that take their lives, I truly believe that a large part of that is involved with the transition. And it may be 3, 5, 7 years after your transition, but a lot of it's because that person failed to find what's next for them, their passion, their success, their community, their culture. And at some point they feel like they're just lost and they're alone. And so, that's where I find that LinkedIn, and just making sure that you're still connecting with people that share those backgrounds, those interests, those passions really can be huge. We never have to be alone on this platform. And there is there's no community that's more engaged on LinkedIn than us. So I kind of took that on another sideways.
Listen,
you guys, this is like great conversation. Sorry about it.
You did phenomenal, man. Like this has been a great episode. I mean that. And like I said, you're a great speaker. It's clear, and your message is clear. And I think that like when we ask this question about mental fitness, more often than not, it comes back to that. What you just said comes back to community and understanding you're not alone in this process. You do have to reach out. That's that, and that can be hard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it can be hard. It can be embarrassing. There's a lot of emotions that go on with that. But, I know, look, that was Howie's mission. That's why we made this show.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you made HireMilitary. There are people out there that can help you. So if you are going through a tough time, or you feel like you might be approaching that, or you're in denial about it, which you are, reach out, because there's people that want to help you. It's not a weakness to reach out. That's the other side of this. You're not weak to ask for help. You're strong. Actually, it's quite the opposite. So, Mike, this has been a great episode. You're phenomenal. I love what you're doing. Conversation was phenomenal. You apologized after every segment, and you didn't need to. This is all great. I want you to know that.
I know it's been an absolute pleasure. I just the conversation really got me. The engagement with you and Howie really got me on a roll on some of these topics, and I try to keep things a little bit shorter. That's why I apologize.
No, you're fine.
But I feel like. For this community, for your community, the free flowing conversation hopefully is of value.
Well, that's how you learn, right? Mm-hmm. So, Howie, any final words before I close?
Tremendous value, Mike. And again, I am so thankful that we had a chance to meet. I'm thankful that that may have prompted you to commit to doing this, because I will tell you, folks who listen to this episode when we finally post it will get tremendous value. They're getting value from you every day. And I see you every day on LinkedIn. I follow you on LinkedIn, and you're living everything you talked about. You are living and proving. And again, I just appreciate you taking the time with us to share these, incredible value with our audience. And when we hope that audience continues to grow, and hopefully you'll help us do that.
Yeah. Absolutely happy. This is the most fun I've had on a podcast. Since I started doing them. So anytime.
Well, again, thank you so much for being here today, Mike. Really
Mike,
appreciate it.
Really quick, obviously the place to find is on LinkedIn. We talked about that, but any other resources or websites people should visit to connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is it. I mean, we have a HireMilitary page. HireMilitary.us is our page for any service members or veterans that are looking for opportunities, whether they're DoD SkillBridge internships or direct placement. So we are working with a lot of companies to help get them service member, veteran, or military spouse hires. And then, if they have a question about the digital networking professional program, look, soldiers are able to get it at no cost to them through credentialing assistance. So they can reach out to me and I'll be happy to connect them to our team to help them get through the program. Yeah. My other thing, just so everybody knows, is I won't do anything that charges service members. So, if you got a program you want to stand up and you want me to endorse it, my first question is, do you charge the service member? How are you funding this? And if the answer is I charge a service member, I'm like, sorry, more the best. I appreciate you, go do your thing. But, my goal is that every service member should have the resources they need. Every transitioning service member should have the resources they need at no cost to them. So
I love it.
That's even a great message in saying goodbye.
Yeah. Anyway, Mike, you've been great. So you've been listening to Life After the Military. Again, it's powered by Pivotal Moments Media. Check us out at pivotalmoments.org for more inspirational content. Education, you can help donate to great organizations that are all about transitioning from the military. For Howie Cohen and Michael Quinn, I'm Lee Elias. Thank you so much for joining us. And make sure to keep an eye out for more episodes of Life After the Military. We are wherever podcasts can be heard. We're also on LinkedIn. There you go, Howie. Right? Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day, everybody.